Welcome to the Divorce Matters Podcast, where we teach you how to survive the family court system. We will give you no-nonsense, straightforward strategies for getting you an equitable outcome. We guarantee you won't hear this advice anywhere else. A reminder that we are not attorneys and this is not legal advice. However, we will help you more than any attorney ever will. And now, here's your hosts, Michael Alexander and Mark Fidelman.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Divorce Matters. Today, joining me is Michael Volpe. He is another person of interest for us because he is in the press. You just heard from Megan Fox in a previous episode. Now we have somebody else from the press. And I like it when the press is involved with us because they're out there doing what the rest of us can't, or we don't have the platform that they do, and there's just not enough press covering what's happening in family courts. What I love to see, like Megan saw, is it's eye-opening what's going on in these courts. And the reason why it can happen is because there's no accountability, and there's not enough press covering it to provide accountability. So these judges do what they want. The actors in the system do what they want. And since they're not held to account, hey, maybe we'll screw somebody over. Maybe we'll accept money. Maybe, we'll design it so that the parents are paying money when they shouldn't have to because they didn't do what they were accused of doing. There's so many ways these people are making money and taking money from you, the people. Anyway, with that long introduction, I do want to allow Michael to provide a brief bio of himself before we jump right in.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm an investigative journalist. I've been one for over a decade, and I investigate just about everything: police corruption, political corruption, and a lot of things in court, particularly family courts, CPS, and that sort of thing.
Excellent. Well, it was great to have you. Love talking to the press. I used to write for Forbes for 4 years, more on the business side. But I would enjoy much more what you do. I just, you got to make a living, and I'm working on my own case for that matter. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the press. Let's just start with that. Why do you think there's not more press covering what's going on, not just in St. Louis? St. Louis is the tip of the iceberg, Michael. It's happening all over the country. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, there's three main reasons why family court CPS stories generally aren't covered. The first reason is the much more significant threat of a lawsuit than the average story. So if you are covering President Trump, President Biden, anybody else who's famous, they're called a public figure, can say almost anything about him, no matter how inaccurate, Trump fake news all the time. And you can get sued, of course, but it won't go anywhere because their threshold is so high, it'll get thrown out of court and you'll probably get your legal payments paid for. These stories can mainly often involve what's called a private figure, and their threshold is much lower. And you're often accusing private figures, a lawyer, maybe a guardian ad litem, maybe a litigant, of very serious things, either crimes, covering up crimes, perjury. You're not accusing them of jaywalking. So you have an elevated threat of a lawsuit. Number two, they take a long time. They're complex stories to begin with. Number two, there's a threat of a lawsuit. So during the editing, I know this happened on some of my stories. It takes a really long time because they're checking, double checking, triple checking. What can get us sued? That's actually what the editor's going through. And that's not happening on most stories. And then number three, so what's the payoff? If you go through 1 and 2, but these create 3 times as much traffic as what you're normally used to, you'll ride out that risk all day long. But sometimes they do. Megan's definitely did, but a lot of them don't. They're good. They're really good. People who read them say it's a great article, but they don't necessarily generate any more traffic. So ask yourself, if you're the media, you can get sued really easily. You're working a lot longer than normal on a story, and maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less, right around the same is the payoff in terms of the traffic. And that combination is a really good reason why you don't see more of it.
But isn't that true with any kind of public corruption? And then I'd add to that is the press's job to keep our government accountable. That is their job. Now, I know in this day and age, the press has to make money. I know increasingly how difficult it is, given all the competition that's out there, including this podcast, for example. But still, come on, there's got to be ways that we can motivate more people like you to get involved and to cover this. And my question to you then is, how do we do that? Do I hand you a story on a silver platter, or do I do something extreme? What is it that?
Right. Well, number one, it's not that they're choosing to do nothing instead of covering your story. They're choosing to cover another story, which is easier for them. It's not that, in their minds, they're doing their job. It's just you have a limited amount of resources. The ones that get through, they often have, number one, celebrities. So if there's a celebrity involved, that really helps. But number two, often the story involves a theme that the media likes. So if somebody's guns were taken away as part of the divorce, which I've seen, that they use that. Well, you can get a lot of conservatives to be interested in your family court story if you also had your guns taken away. And there's ways like to get liberals involved if the right pet project for them is involved. And I saw that it was several years ago now. It was like a Navy guy who was threatened with losing his custody because he was going to be on a ship, and the judge demanded that he be at a hearing, even though he was going to be on a ship serving for the Navy. And Fox News picked it up, and all the conservative media picked it up, and they made it like, it wasn't like a family court thing. It was more like, another example of an anti-military bias, which Fox News loves. Drudge Report picked it up. All the conservative, they love to how certain people thumb their nose at our military. Here's another example. So that's the way they covered it. All over the place. That was a family court. If you know family court, full well, there's plenty of judges who are so arrogant and tyrannical. It doesn't matter if you're going to be on a ship the day that she's scheduled. I think it was a female judge scheduled court. You better be there. I'm going to take your kids.
But if an attorney has a conflict in court, then that's okay. We can't schedule for that day.
Right. But look, a conflict of interest among attorneys that's like very inside baseball, it's hard to get the media interested in that. Now, if the conflict of interest involves sex, the three things that I've found that sell almost all the time: race, sex, and celebrity. So if you can involve one of those three things that's sort of titillating, you can get people more interested. But like I said, there's a lot to overcome when the story can get you sued a lot more, when it's more complicated, and there's no evidence necessarily that once you're done, you're going to have an outcome that's better than these simpler stories that won't get me sued. And I can get like three of them out. But I've been working on this since really the end of 2013, but really full board since 2015. And what I've seen is that a significantly larger percentage of the media is covering this now than was just 5-6 years ago. And maybe it's still not enough.
Well, if it's not enough because it's not changing, the legislatures aren't doing anything about it. This is a loud cry coming from quite a few moms and dads that are out there.
Right. Well, so when I first started doing this, people were complaining, no one covers our story. Now the complaint is more, look at how much evidence is out there. Look how many people have come forward and still nothing has happened. So that sounds like in the evolution, you're still kind of winning. These things, I don't want to say they take time, but we live in reality. We don't live in some utopia that because you were wrong and you are doing the right thing and the cause is noble, and this is an injustice, that this means that the world will fix itself for you. It takes time. Legislators aren't that smart. They have other issues. And this issue, it's been raised, but maybe not enough yet, but you keep going. But I think a lot of progress has been made, and there has been like smaller victories here and there. It's just the sweeping national reform hasn't happened. But I know there was like a pretty significant investigation somewhere in Georgia. And I remember one of the articles they wrote was that within a year after their investigation, the amount of appointments of guardian ad litem dropped by like 90-some%. And they were showing that they were all corrupt and just being appointed for no reason and just to drive up fees. And all of a sudden, like 90% cut. Well, obviously in that locality, you saw pretty significant change. So there are victories here and there, but sweeping change hasn't happened. But, that's not easy.
Well, I know. Well, I don't know if you've studied it, but the amount of money that's in the system is just massive resistance to any kind of change, especially when you talk about Title 4D. And then, as you found in St. Louis, this, I'm going to appoint you, you appoint me, we're all going to make money type of thing at the expense of the children, the kids. I mean, my God, man, this is like the mafia. And once you get in, you can't get out.
Right. There. Number one, there are funding streams everywhere. There's something called the Violence Against Women Act, which Joe Biden, when he was senator, that was his bill. That's one of his claims to fame. It's what it allows is for the primarily women, because it is the Violence Against Women Act, primarily devious women can misuse it and they can get funds to fund their campaign of false allegations, because they make those funding make it very easy to do false allegations. There's something called the Fatherhood Initiative, which is the flip side. Devious and abusive men. John Allen Muhammad, before he became the Beltway sniper, got money through this program. But it's mostly used by abusive men. Title 4D, Title 4E. There's a case out of Minnesota that the most that I do, the Rucky case. The man who has sole custody has everything. His ex-wife is on the streets homeless, and he lives in one of 4 homes, but he's qualified to chase her for child support through Title 4D. In fact, it says it on one of his child support orders, bolstering his case that the money is really important to get, that I'm going through Title 4D, that Title 4D, that helps you chase your ex for child support, mostly used by men and women who have stuck their exes with child support they can't afford, that everyone knows they can't afford, that the purpose is for them to fall behind on their child support so they can be chased. Why? Because you can put people in jail for that. Title 4B and E, those incentivize taking kids, placing them into foster care, even adopting them out. There's something called the Adoption of Safe Families Act. But as you said, even if you got rid of all the federal funds, these lawyers and judges and the guardian ad litem and therapists have learned that you can just make money by yourself. If there's no conflict, create conflict. If there is conflict, you just light the flame for conflict. And then your solution is an alphabet soup of court actors, all your friends. Before you know it, the judge is bringing in Elaine Podlowski. Elaine Podlowski is bringing in James Reed. James Reed is bringing in Ron Lubin. Ron Lubin is bringing in a 4th person. I talked to a guy today at 17. And this is how they make money. And one thing, I know Megan probably didn't talk about this, but the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, which is a trade group, they are the ones who have basically created it. They're a trade group, but they're essentially like a shadow family court, because AFCC is family court judges, family court lawyers, family court therapists, family court anything. If you're like making money in that like court realm, you have a reason to join them. So they do seminars now, webinars, they do continuing education, they do a whole bunch of other things, but it's all like to pump out a bunch of research that, number one, there are a lot of mostly vindictive women who will plant ideas in their kids' head, and that's why kids are saying they're being abused. This is the research they're pumping out. They pump out that there are high conflict cases, that 2 people warring each other, and their solution to every problem, appoint court actors, appoint a guardian ad litem. They actually put out research about this and seminars and webinars about, how a parenting coordinator can simmer down a high conflict case. Right? That's the seminar, right? So judges hear this. So judge hears high conflict. No, wow, well, I better get a parenting coordinator like that seminar said. Oh, I know a great one from AFCC. And I may, they don't speak to themselves that way, but you get the idea. That's how you get 15. I did a case out of Connecticut, Sunny Kelly. She had 12, all of them AFCC. And that's their playbook, and their members are making tons and tons of money out of it. And you can get rid of all of the federal funds, and some of that will go away. But most of that system, and by the way, in St. Louis County, Elaine Podlowski, the main villain, she's a member of AFCC. I think I found out of that Zoom conference 7 or 8. Now, keep in mind, they don't release their membership. So like Elaine puts it on her website. So that's how I found out she's a member. Some people boast about it, but if you are a member and you don't tell anyone, it won't necessarily be on the internet. So I found 7 or 8. They may all be members. But the AFCC absolutely plays a huge role in what's happening in St. Louis. They play a huge role in what's happening all around the country, not just all around the country, all around the world. And this misuse of parental alienation is a global phenomenon. It's absolutely being driven by this group.
So this group is a global group?
Yeah, of judges, lawyers. I get correspondence with people telling me from all over the world that they were involved in a case and they had these members of AFCC. The reason I get them, I wrote one of the landmark articles on him. It's called Making Divorce Pay. It was on Capital Research Center. In fact, I mentioned Sonny's story in that. But yeah, because it's basically like a global trade group. And that's one of the reasons why certain phenomena that are happening in the US is also happening in like England, Australia, and New Zealand, because they are influencing the entire globe.
And do they have a website that you know?
Yeah, well, if you put in, I don't remember, I think it's afcc.net, but if you put in Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, you can get their website. Peter Salem used to be their executive director. I don't know who heads that group now, but look, everything on there looks okay. And we do continuing education, we do seminars. You have to know what they're really doing to understand how they're infiltrating the system.
Why do you think nobody's filed a civil RICO against them?
Well, because I think civil RICO is a lot harder to prove than just saying we should file a civil RICO case. RICO, I've been fascinated with RICO since my first book, which is called Prosecutors Gone Wild, The Trial of Chuck Benici, John Gliatoni, and Louise Marshall. And Chuck was the mayor of Chicago Heights. The other two were in his city council. And they charged all 3 of them in this like complex bribery scheme. And they called it RICO because they basically said, you're using the mayor's office as a criminal enterprise and you just want to get bribes left and right. If you're a federal prosecutor, I think you can prove. You don't need a federal prosecutor to file a civil RICO. No, to file it. I think you can prove RICO if you're a federal prosecutor. I think if you're a lawyer, a civil lawyer, you're going to have a really hard time getting a jury to a conviction.
Why do you say that? It's civil, so it's a preponderance of the evidence, right?
Right, but RICO is complex, and
I know it's complex, but
you better know exactly what you're doing, and the only people who know exactly what they're doing when it comes to RICO are former federal prosecutors who actually prosecuted it.
Well, that's true on the criminal side. I'm just wondering on the civil side, since the burden of proof is less, and you have a jury, and if you just explain to the jury like you're explaining to me what's going on, and you prove it with actual facts, and I'm sure you've got plenty of witnesses to draw from.
Right.
Again, I'm not an attorney. Don't pretend to be one. But it just seems like this is the very definition of a RICO, what we're talking about. It's a mafia type of organization where there's payoffs.
I totally agree. In fact, one of the blogs that I wrote about St. Louis County as a criminal enterprise, that's the argument I make. I've seen some RICO lawsuits filed. I think they were mostly filed pro se. I have not come across an attorney who filed it because that would be interesting.
No, they're afraid. They're afraid because they don't want to lose their livelihood.
Or yeah, who knows? I don't. It's an extreme. Look, go read the law someday. It's so hard to read. It's like
I do every day. I have something I read every day about the law, and I'm really looking at civil RICO because there's been some successful cases and mostly unsuccessful. But if you look at the successful, you get the elements of what it takes to be successful. There's a lot of case law around both.
Right. I wrote about a couple, but they were eventually dismissed. But in 2014, some women filed a civil RICO lawsuit in 2 counties in New Jersey, but again, both pro se. And I don't remember how far they got, but they got some publicity, which was basically the realistic hope they were hoping to get, because they were trying a RICO lawsuit pro se. Realistically, you're not going to probably win the case unless you find a lawyer somewhere from the beginning to the end. But I've seen them. I agree with you conceptually, but neither of us are attorneys, though. It's a racket. These people are doing it to collect money. They are committing acts of fraud to do it, acts of perjury. They're also violating judicial procedure, not just judicial, but other procedures. All of and RICO in the law, it says a pattern of racketeering activity. So if you show, Elaine Podlowski committed perjury in this hearing, 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 most jurors will go, that sounds like a pattern of racketeering activity. And that's basically, that's sort of what you're supposed to prove, that she was engaging in this hypothetical. She was engaging in this pattern of perjury as part of a criminal enterprise to traffic children. That would be the argument you would make. And yeah, look, I think there's plenty of evidence of examples of perjury. I wrote an article about a guy named Brian Dunlop, and one of the things that he did, was another guardian ad litem in St. Louis County, is he misrepresented the girl discloses that her father is abusing her. She discloses to her mother, then she discloses to I don't remember where they go, but child welfare, the police, a doctor. And the guy said she only disclosed to her mother, Dunlop did, which is not only not true, but he said it in court. So it's either perjury or obstruction, or whatever it is, whatever this specific term is. But obviously, it's not number one, an insignificant lie, and the lie is clearly designed to besmirch the mother. So, and so I also heard something similar with a woman named Ann Duncan Hiley, and she did the same thing. She was not a guardian ad litem, but she was brought into a case, and she testified, well, the girl only disclosed to her mother. And again, that's not true. And again, a pattern of racketeering activities. If you show that they not only commit perjury, but the exact same kind of perjury, and in each case, the outcome is the same. To me, that seems like it's RICO, but it has to be put in front of a jury. The arguments have to be made, and a jury has to agree. And none of that has happened. It's all academic, you and me just talking about it right now. It has to be proven in a court of law. But the reason it's really important, in my opinion, Rudy Giuliani, that's when he first made his name. It was the Mafia Commission trial. That was all RICO. He was the first, one of the reasons why he became a big deal. He's the first person to figure out how to use RICO in a really aggressive way. And it showed exactly what you're supposed to do. But he's at a press conference. They got the conviction. He goes, in a court of law, we proved the mafia exists. Those men in there are the head of it. And it's real. And remember, he went on. But the reason that was important is for years they denied it, that the mafia existed. They denied it. There was a mafia commission. They denied all of these things. And it was all just, rumor and innuendo and this, that, and the other. And now a jury of 12 people heard it, and they said it exists. You can't ignore it. You can't claim it's not real. And with this, even if it's in St. Louis County, even civilly, if you have a jury say, the St. Louis County Family Courts acts like an organized criminal enterprise, that's a lot more serious than this guardian ad litem over here, Elaine Podlowski. She commits perjury a lot. And this other guardian ad litem, they mislead the court in other ways. And then this shrink over here, James Reed, he will ignore tests that don't go along with him. All of those seem like they're kind of big issues, but it's not the same thing as it's run like a criminal enterprise. That you can't ignore. Your court, and then the question becomes, well, is it only St. Louis? How many more other counties are run like a criminal enterprise?
Come on. There's nobody holding them accountable. It's happening all over. It's happening all over the country. I mean, there might be, I'm not painting a broad brush here, but I suspect, whenever you don't have accountability, or my biggest beef is with the press, when we don't have transparency into what's going on and investigative reporters like you, then of course, if they think they can get away with it, then they're going to do it. That's just human nature. I'll just get away with it. No one's going to do anything to me. I'll just get away with it. So we need more people holding them accountable, whether that's lawsuits. I'm suspicious of lawsuits because I just think the system will manipulate their way out of it because they control the system. It's like trying to sue a system that has got all these, crazy rules and regulations and loopholes, and any way they can get to dismiss a case, they will. Right. But the press, they can't control the press. If the press would just grow a pair and start reporting on some of this, I mean, my God, there are so many people that have been impacted by family courts. Those are easy stories. Just go out and talk to people that have been impacted by what's going on. And there's going to be a pattern. There's going to be a courthouse where 90 dads and 5 moms have been unfairly treated in a family court because the judge didn't like them. And since nobody's holding the judge accountable, the judges just do what they want,
Right. About a decade ago, maybe even a little longer, there was a guy named Stewart Greeneberg who was like the equivalent of James Reed. He's like a court-appointed psychiatrist, but somewhere in Washington. And he was exposed by the media, and he eventually killed himself because the walls were closing in. That created enough publicity. Basically, all his dirty laundry, if you will, came out, and he killed himself because the walls were closing in. He was going to be charged, and whatever the charges were was just going to be piled on. And he knew how much bad he had done, and he couldn't cover it up. But that started with some stories. So you're right. Like I said, if there's reasons why the media doesn't cover it. I did an article in late 2019. Kara Witkowski was a very similar story to the ones you heard in St. Louis, except for one even more tragic result. So she was, it was Kankakee, Kane County, Illinois, which is somewhat near Chicago. But a Judge Dalton, John Dalton, just suddenly out of the blue, reverses custody, gives sole custody to her ex, even though he'd been credibly admitted twice to raping her, had been found in possession of a bunch of child porn. And then she's kept away from her son starting somewhere like in the summer of 2019 until he dies in her ex's custody on October 31st, 2019. It was published at the Daily Caller, and it was a 2-parter. One was about Kara, and the next one was these other 2 were the same with John Dalton. And the pattern was that he was covering up child molestation. And it took them they did publish them, and Kara's did well. The second one didn't do that well. And it took them a really long time. They did publish it, but the reason it took a long time is, oh my God, the threat of a lawsuit there was enormous. But it was an important story, and that's why they published it. But God, it's really hard when that's how long it takes. It's hard to get a lot of them out. It's hard to get media to be excited about doing them on a consistent basis when they take that long. And they're important stories. And look, it was the Daily Caller, which is a national publication, which published it, which shows you how important that particular story is. But that fits a lot better in Kane County, which brings up another problem, which is the local media. They've started to do more of these, but they do not take these on, even though that's where these stories need to be. It shouldn't be Megan and I covering this. All of St. Louis should be all over this. If I'm a reporter in St. Louis, I can make my career on this. And the beauty of this story is it's like the pie is so huge. Whatever I'm working on, 20 other people can be working on their own thing. We're not even going to bump into each other. There's so much corruption all throughout the court. It's enough for 200 reporters. And they've covered it a little, and that's because this story has exploded. But for the most part, you can't get the local media to cover it enough. They did some with Kara's case, I should point out, and that started after my article. Eventually, the local newspapers did cover it. a little bit, though. And it happened in Palatine. That Patch has done a really good job on it. But basically, look, beyond that, the cops just dropped the investigation and claimed that they don't know how it was 2 years old, her son, how he died, no idea, holding no one responsible. And they're for now getting away with it. But bringing me to my original point, it was not my editor's fault that it took so long. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't Kara's fault. It was nobody's fault. It's the nature of that story. Really hard. You can go find it online. I can't remember the exact title, but just about every word in that article could get somebody sued. And so it took a long time. And, do you think they had an appetite for more of those? Of course not. Would you?
Would you have to say it that way, though? I wrote for the press for 4 years. Why couldn't you position it in a way where you're not naming actors in the court, but you're telling the stories of what's going on there, and then you eyewitness testimony to back that up? Let them be the ones that say it, not you. I don't understand why this is not that. I don't see it as that complicated, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, you can't. You can limit it. You don't have to name the person. I wanted to name the people. But they could.
Saw them on Zoom.
They could limit it, but you're just limiting the amount that you're going to get sued in, and they do that sometimes. And sometimes you may see a story and wonder maybe there's like a whole piece missing, and that might have been a lawyer who said you got to take this out because the threat of a lawsuit is too great, and that may very well have happened to KMOV. But as I said, it's very complicated. I'm cynical, not as cynical as you. There are like good tangible reasons why they stay away. But as I said, on the flip side, over the last 5 years, it's grown. Reason Magazine covers it from time to time. Daily Wire covers these stories from time to time.
I saw something in Mother Jones just the other day.
Right. Mother Jones, the guy, Pat, I'm not going to remember his name, but National File, which is a somewhat new place, they cover it. And I've seen it in other national places. And I've also seen a lot more local coverage. I think it was early 2020. I'm not going to remember the judge's name, but it was in North Carolina. This guy and his wife, they're basically done with the divorce. There's like a fair amount in terms of like monetary value of personal property. They just hadn't completely figured out who gets what. And this judge was just so frustrated. She shows up at the guy's house. It was like a federal agent, right? And he's videotaping her. And she goes, I don't care if I have a warrant. And she had a cop with her, right? I'm going into your house and I'm taking the personal property. We're going to decide this right now. And he's like, what? No, you need a warrant? No. And she even says, if you try to stop me, this guy's going to arrest you. And then she had the guy walk up to him and he had to stop videotaping. Well, he released that. And within a week, it's on the local news, and then all over the state of North Carolina. And oh, by the way, this judge got written up. I don't know how she got sanctioned, but she admitted during that process, this is like the 10th or 11th time that she had shown up at someone's house without a warrant. So that's an example of the press doing exactly what they're supposed to do in a story like that. He had a video. It's easy from there. And so
But you don't always have a video.
No, I know. Well, but in this case they did. But look, the media didn't ignore it. And not only did they not ignore it, but they kept at it.
Where's all the undercover? Where are the call for whistleblowers within these courts? They know what's going on. Where's the undercover stuff? I mean, is it take funding?
Right. Well, I think, the Zoom conference was undercover. Yeah, there's not a lot of it. People always
call former employees of these judges, these clerks and attorneys. Call them up.
I've communicated with them. They're not going to give you stuff. This is their career path.
Well, not all of them stay in that career.
The clerk probably wants to be a judge someday, somewhere. Maybe a high-powered lawyer. This is like a unique way to gain some experience. They're not going to rattle the judge. They're not in it for they're trying to save the world. They're trying to create a career. So it's hard to get this stuff, but we are getting stuff. The people who have the undercovers.
When you see kids being taken away from perfectly fit parents because of corruption and you're not saying anything, there's a special place in hell for those people. I can't imagine living with myself. Like, there's just no way. There's no way I could see that.
Support for this podcast comes from KidsMatter.Charity, a nonprofit dedicated to fighting for kids' rights in difficult divorce situations. Donate at KidsMatter.Charity to help them restore common sense to the family courts.
So look, Frank Serpico saw widespread graft in the New York City Police Department, like lots and lots of cops on the take. Guess what? He wasn't the only cop that saw it. Every cop saw it. One cop, two cops. There was another guy who helped him as well. I can't remember that cop's name, but out of like 39,000. Yeah, no, it takes courage to be a whistleblower. The rest of everybody who was in the New York City Police Department at the time that Serpico blew the whistle knew what was going on with the graft. Two of them spoke up. It's really hard. It's the same thing. I think there's a special place in hell for people who know that a ton of cops are on the take. So instead of busting the criminals, they're in bed with them. Yeah. I think you could say there's a special place. But you know what? Almost none of the cops said anything. I'm out of Chicago. There's a cop named John Burge who was torturing confessions. Now, a cop did bust him. It was a whistleblower cop eventually. But it was like 18 years before that cop stepped forward. Most cops knew what was going on. But almost no one spoke up. It's really hard to be a whistleblower. I know a lot of whistleblowers, but the people who have the good stuff aren't just the court employees.
Well, they could be leaking recordings just like they did with the Zoom. They don't know who did leak that Zoom video. They could be photocopying notes and leaking it to people like you. That stuff should be happening if it's corruption. I don't want it to be happening.
No, it is. And as I told Megan, as I'm going to keep repeating, I think there's a ledger in the same, because I believe there's widespread bribery going on because the judges, their salary is not nearly enough for everyone to want to be a judge, given how much money everybody else is making. So I think it's widespread. So the only way you could account for all of this is on a ledger or whatever you call it. On something, I'd imagine it would be on like an Excel that this judge is getting this bribe for this case and this judge is, and because how else would you keep track? Because I'm guessing there's like hundreds of these cases. So if it's out there, I'd really like to get my hands on it. And you can send it to me anonymously. But no, look, it's hard, and I know what you're saying, but these people. The folks who are in this system, I've confronted them, not as much in St. Louis, but in Minnesota, where they have just as much corruption in Dakota County, and specifically, I've talked to clerks who are in on it, who like make sure that the right judge gets on the right case and they steer paperwork. They're like behind the scenes, like being one cog in the wheel to make it go. Clerks, lawyers, they all know what's happening, but you're taking on the entire system.
They don't have to, though. If they're listening to this, all they need to do is leak it.
I can tell you that I posted that Zoom conference. I don't know who actually recorded it, except that it wasn't me or how I got it. And I think there were a lot of links in that chain. I think there may have been like 5, 6, 10 hands that it went through before it reached me. Maybe not 10, but you get the idea. I don't think it was a direct. I think it was very indirect. And you could do something like that as well. But look, this is what we've been getting, though. That Nicole Zellweger, Judge Zellweger, and the 14-year-old, that's a leaked recording. That's exactly, those kinds of things are exactly the kind of thing that blow this up. But I was kind of thinking about it today. Podlowski, let's take Podlowski, because she's like she's having her Me Too moment, kind of, right? This is like, in a sense, like similar to being like the target of Me Too accusations. They're not exactly Me Too, but Me Too in another way. And, like Charlie Rose and all of that, it didn't end up well for anyone who got targeted like this. So I don't think things are going to go well for Elaine Podlowski, and she's not the only one. Sarah Pleben, getting a lot from her. I'm looking at this lady, Ann Duncan Hively. So a lot of St. Louis family court actors are about to have their Me Too moment. And so now is the time to release whatever you got. And I think people have a lot. that they're holding on to because they're afraid for a variety of reasons. But
I've interviewed two people. One is former CPS, another, and we're doing a video on this where judges have been caught changing the transcripts to suit their own needs. So that's going to be released pretty soon. So there's and we call them all out. So I'm one conduit. You could send it to me. There's no way they're going to get it out of me. Or you just do it anonymously, and we'll validate it, verify it, and we'll put it out there if it has any validity to it. And then you've got a platform yourself. So we'll give out your contact information after this.
Right. Yeah. No, I'll take anything, and I do release a lot of that kind of raw data. But that audio was really interesting. You knew how potent and devastating that audio was. And for those who don't know, Nicole Zellweger is this judge in St. Louis County, and she's confronting a 14-year-old. And it's hard to hear in the beginning. It goes about 9 minutes, but keep playing or fast forward a little bit. Right around 3 minutes, it definitely is clear enough to hear, and you know exactly what's happening. And you hear the girl say, "I'm being molested. Don't send me to my dad." And the judge saying, "There's no evidence." And she's like, "I'm saying it to you. What do you mean there's no evidence? I'm in court telling you that's evidence." And it is. All right. She understood the law better than the judge. And the judge basically forced her. And at the end, the judge sent her to a psych ward. Well, so I released this thing, and I knew immediately how potent it was because within 24 hours, she schedules an emergency hearing to try to get rid of it. And so when you take that kind of very aggressive action, that shows that what you're acting on is very problematic for you. And it is potent and devastating. And the irony, of course, is far fewer people knew about that audio before all of her shenanigans after the audio came out than before. But that audio is one example of the kind of thing that you're hoping to get leaked, and it is being leaked. The St. Louis, that's the difference. St. Louis compared to all of the other places that I've looked at is the amount of this kind of very powerful jumps off the page kind of documents and data, video and audio that we can work with that create better stories. And so certainly in St. Louis, people that have things, give them to us because we are able to use them. And look, we're just beginning. It's been about a month, and we've accomplished a lot. Judge Zellweger eventually recused herself. And as I pointed out, on her own motion, it's called sua sponte. No one even asked her to recuse herself, even though she's a horrible, awful person and judge and totally biased. At the moment she recused herself, nobody was even asking for it. That's how badly she wanted off that case, that she just did it on her own. All right. And that was right after she called this other thing on her own, which, as I told Megan, that's a sign you don't know what you're doing. Judges are allowed to do things on their own motion, but it's supposed to be really rare. You got enough tools. You don't need to use this one all the time. It's basically for like the unique situation when you really have to. You can't wait for a motion. You don't have to. There's no emergency to recuse yourself. Wait for someone to ask. But no, she couldn't wait. So, and it started with that audio. If that girl doesn't, and I think it was the girl who actually recorded, I could be wrong, but if that audio wasn't recorded, it's harder to tell that story. It really is. With the audio, it's really easy. And now she's in trouble, and she's one of like a growing number of not only cases that we're covering, but that we've put into the sphere that people know about. Like Zellweger, the mother is Freiner. This is something that like more and more people are now just familiar with because they've seen the story in multiple places. And I presume, I'm not living down in St. Louis County, but from the people I talk to, all of these stories are spreading throughout there. And those are the kinds of stories that have an impact. As far as like getting change, you eventually have to have enough publicity and pressure to either create hearings. In Serpico's case, they called a Knapp commission, which was Judge Knapp was his retired judge, so it's called the Knapp commission. It was basically like these folks that were chosen who were supposed to be independent, and they wind up being independent, but they had all kinds of powers to investigate what Serpico was bringing forward. And that's what ended all of that widespread graft. It's not that the New York, I'm not saying NYPD is completely fixed, but it's night and day compared to what it was to what it is now. And so you would maybe have this independent commission. I'll give you another, Crimes on the Waterfront, which is the basis for the movie. It was a long, in-depth expose of how the mafia was controlling the docks. And that led to like an independent body. And that's how they dropped the corruption. But in order, the dynamics of having this kind of like sea change is, number one, you create enough media attention and there's so much pressure that something dramatic has to be done. And then people start calling, we need to have an independent third person body. And how, if it takes on a form that really is truly independent, then it affects change. But sometimes what they like to do is hide behind these bodies and they make them feckless. But if you're talking about change, that or the state legislature holds hearings, and you have to have huge changes in the judiciary and not just family court if you want to fix this. All sorts of things in terms of accountability. In my opinion, all of these guardian ad litem and evaluators, they need to be eliminated. If they're talking about reforming guardian ad litem, well, that's all garbage. They're not going to reform anything, and the reforms won't do anything. And in 2 years, you'll have the same problems. The reform is you don't need them. See, what the policymakers should take away from Elaine Podlowski and Sarah Pleban and Julie Friedrich over in Dakota County and this lady, Barbara Burkhart in Suffolk County, is that these people, they just cause more problems and they charge money and they do nothing. And people should be able to get divorced without it being this complex maze. People should be able to come into court, present their arguments, and have a judge decide custody if they can't decide it, without it being created this monster where the judge appoints a first person who suggests a second person. So now we got 2 people, and before you know, you got 10 people. That shouldn't happen. That's not necessary. The only reason any of them are doing it is because they make money. All their research that this helps is bogus. It's pumped out by the same people who benefit from it. And that's what the policymakers should take away from this. If I could get rid of guardian ad litem anywhere, I feel like I accomplished a lot. But everywhere, that would be amazing, because they are not just useless, but not just counterproductive, but they are destroying your life as they take all your money. How is that possible?
Well, that's what most of the people listening to this are asking, is how is it possible? And worse, why isn't the press covering it?
Right. Well, I'm not going to keep repeating on how the press is covering it.
No, I understand, but I was being rhetorical.
How it's possible is because these courts, they are courts of equity. They are not courts of law. They give themselves power they don't really have. But essentially, the judges have been granted so much discretion that they can do what they want. And since they're the judge, there's not much you can do to stop them. So as a result, they have created over time fiefdoms. And this is why I firmly believe that judges have to be bought off, because the rest of them, you can see how much money they're making. Presumably the judge just makes their judges, which is good. It's like $200,000, if not more, but to be a judge. But I just can't believe you'd go from being this high-powered guardian ad litem / lawyer to being a judge if all you're making is judge salary, because you're going to make $1 million a year easy doing the guardian ad litem lawyer thing. You're not going to do that as a judge unless the judge is getting a lot more. But these judges have been, they can appoint people, they can appoint more people, they can coerce you into paying, and there's nothing you can do.
You can't opt out either. That's the biggest problem I have, is that you can't opt out without all parties wanting.
Yeah, let me frame it very quickly. Court order. Court order. You want to know why a judge is so powerful? Court order. Only judges get to write those. But you'd be amazed what court orders do. If a court order says you wear green on Wednesday, wear blue and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone listening to this understands that. So Fortunately, there are remedies, but then you're relying on an appellate court to even hear your case. If it's writ, you can get it heard with an interlocutory or on a end result, a family court at the end of your hearing. You can get the appellate court can hear it, but they automatically take the judge's side. It's a waiting
always.
So you have to have clear and convincing evidence almost to overturn it, which is a civil standard, not the same standard they're using on you in family court. It's ridiculous.
Right. There's a judge out of near Philadelphia or in Philadelphia. Her name is Lyris Young, and she competes for worst judge in America. She's probably the only example of the appellate court being the exposer. She was reversed. It was like 40 times in a year. And then the next judge was like 6. So it's like, if you remember, Babe Ruth was like that. He did like 60 homers. Number 2 was 12. She was like that. She's like 40 times reversed. Next person was like 8. And it was just horror show, taking kids away, not even allowing a hearing, throwing a mom in jail, throwing a dad in jail, just left and right. All of this tyranny it was the appeals court who was like, no, you're not allowed to do this. You again. But you're right. In general, they don't do it. Can I give you the solution that I have to family court?
Yeah, of course.
All right. So but before I give you the solution, any solution I think has to try to attack one or more of these 3 separate problems. So the first problem is judges have too much power. So if your solution reduces the power of judges, like some people like jury trials, and I kind of like them, but not really, though I'm not against them, but they do reduce the power of judges a little bit. So anything to reduce the power of judges, get rid of money. So either you're not bringing money into the system or you're getting rid of it. As you said, Title 4EB, whatever, but also there's a lot of solutions that include like training or an independent third party, like suddenly we need another third person. All of that just brings more money into the system. And the third thing, and this is really important, you need to simplify the system. It's corrupt when it's complicated because it's impossible to follow. That's where you can form the corruption. If it's just a judge, 2 lawyers, and the 2 parties getting divorced, it's a lot harder for the judge to corrupt because it's a very straightforward thing. And he doesn't have the guardian ad litem tool anymore. He just has to make a decision, or she. So here's my solution. Number 1, get rid of Child Protective Services, get rid of all the funding streams. It's called sunsetting. So sunset VAVA, sunset Fatherhood Initiative, sunset Social Security Title IV, B, D, E. If people have other ones, let me know. I'm sure there's other funding streams, but also in civil courts, you have to write this. It's probably got to start in maybe in a county to see how it will work out, because this is really radical. You write it in, the court shall not, and shall is a very important word in the law, shall not make any custody decision. So what would happen is if you had a child with an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend, you guys have to figure out everything. The court can't help you at all. And if you were married, the court would oversee the splitting of the assets in an equitable way, and that's it. You figure out what to do with the kids. The court never gets involved. The only time any custody thing happens is if one parent is at least arrested for a crime to the child, and that's it. If you think the parent is like verbally abusive, they're controlling, they're a drunk, those things probably aren't enough. Maybe a drunk if you caught them drinking in front of the kid, but none of that's enough. Families have all kinds of screwed up problems. It's the family's problem. But besides that, my solution is very libertarian. I think if you got the court completely out of it, there's no perfect solution, and there's like hypothetical things that somebody might be thinking that could happen, and I might not have a good solution with my idea. But on the whole, I think that's the way to go. Just get the courts completely out of it. That simplifies it. Really simple. It takes all the money out.
They do that in Scandinavia. A lot of what happens in Sweden and Norway, that's what happens. Only about 3% of cases go before any kind of judge. I think an interim step would be to eliminate some of the incentives that you talked about but also to have a citizen committee overseeing the judges, and any judge that makes a decision around custody that's adverse to 50-50, challenged, the committee has to be involved with that and make a decision based on the facts.
Do you know what I had an idea that was just rolling around in my head. So this is still formulating, but I think that there could be like a way to recall judges. Not every state, but essentially, look, if a judge has generated enough victims, then the victims should all get together and create a recall petition and make the recall petition.
Well, here's the problem, though, and I've run into this, is you try. Good luck getting information about how the judges have ruled and who they've ruled with. They keep it.
It's the victims. You're a victim of the judge. You get 4 or 5. We are.
Where do you find them?
Well, people have found each other. Look. You've got to find. Look, I don't want to give Zuckerberg that's for social media is for, and social media has look. There are like anti-judge groups and all kinds of stuff. But because I see these folks put up like GoFundMe's and with these like shocking stories of things that their judges have done, and you look up the judge, and it seems to be like that's not the only case. So you wonder if like 4 or 5 victims get together and they start a recall campaign, and here's what they've done, and there's probably others, and other people would step forward. That's one thing. I don't those like citizen committees, to me, that complicates the system, and I'm not sure exactly what it would accomplish, but maybe. I think if you take away all of their power,
you have to. Discretionary power.
Right. Then there's very little for you to have oversight over.
Or you say, we're going to strip you of your judicial immunity if you fall outside this box. Now that would be
right, but that's not easier said than done. Judicial immunity is granted to them through the Supreme Court, through one of the worst, most heinous decisions, Stump versus Sparkman, but they fall back on the Stump versus Sparkman. Look, the solution, in my opinion, is a constitutional amendment which defines the judicial immunity much narrower than what that Supreme Court, and you have to, because the Supreme Court has weighed in. So now you have to tell the Supreme Court, no, we don't care about that decision. We're going above your head, and you have to honor this. Because they give immunity, because without it, you'll just get sued left and right. But there is a way to qualify it. So in the egregious case, like in the Rucky case, the judge at one point forced the attorney, Michelle McDonald, for Sandra Grazzini Rucky to conduct part of the custody trial, handcuffed to a wheelchair. He threw the woman out of her house, told her you have three hours to pack whatever you can, wouldn't let her see her kids. And when she and her lawyer sued, he came back with Stump versus Sparkman and was thrown out. He can go and handcuff a lawyer, make that lawyer conduct part of that trial handcuffed, and he can't be sued. That's not egregious, and it's all Stump versus Sparkman. Judges feel completely emboldened, in part because that decision means it's almost impossible to sue. The feds rarely go after you for crimes. She's pretty much untouchable.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's insane how much protection these people have. And then the appellate courts don't do their job enough in order to reprimand those trial court judges that are doing exactly what you just laid out.
Right. As I said, Lyris Young, and you can go look her up. It's Younge. That's the exception, not the rule. That was the one time. The interesting thing, what she did was really, really bad. But she wasn't really that different from other judges. For whatever reason, the appeals court was really offended by the things she did. And they did their job, just one after another. But usually it's like what you say. They will twist themselves in a pretzel in order to justify whatever bizarre thing or things that you have done. And by the way, appeals courts have upheld the decision in that custody trial where he handcuffed the lawyer to a wheelchair. Somehow there was not one appeals court that said, well, just based on your action, I'd say you have bias, so we're going to have to throw out the decision. Not one. All right. So that's an example of how appeals courts usually do it. They'll twist themselves into pretzels. These cases are so complicated. You just ignore all of the bad things the judge did and just focus on whatever you want to focus on. And nobody even notices that you just ignored, the judge forcing a lawyer to conduct part of a trial handcuffed to a wheelchair.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I want to have you back.
Anytime.
The same thing to Megan, because as this case develops in St. Louis, and Michael and I didn't talk about it a lot because you could just listen to my conversation with Megan. We want to have you back, but I do want the ability for people to get a hold of you. How do they get a hold of you?
Best way is through my email, or if you can catch me on Facebook, but it's mvolpe998@gmail.com. And especially if you're in St. Louis, I get requests from all over the world to some degree, though mostly in the country. I'm trying to get to all of them, but I don't want to complain, but I'm getting a lot of people reaching out to me. So I'm trying as hard as I can to do as many of these as I can all at once. And, you're all dropping 200-300 pages worth of documents and saying, did you read it?
Oh, yeah, put together a summary. Maybe tell them how to approach you. I would do what? One pager?
Well, yeah, no, look, right. Now, number one, don't tell me that your case is worse than a rookie case, because some people have heard that's my case. That's the one I do the most. Don't say it's worse. You don't know it. There are none that are worse. She's homeless and jobless. She's been smeared by major media. But yeah, if you can describe what happened to you in a somewhat short, not 100 pages, but like 2 or 3 pages, or maybe 5 pages, that would be the way to go. Something that I could read in a reasonable amount of time that gives me an idea of what's happening. I don't need every detail right away, but I want to understand what's happening. If you've been involved with someone I've covered, make sure to let me know, especially if it's someone in the rookie case. Definitely let me know that, because that always interests me. But yeah, just try to do a summary. Victims can't summarize very well. This one lady once sent me a summary with 60 pages, 60-page summary of her case. And she did think she was summarizing it. So that's what I mean. Like, if it's a few pages so I know what's happening, that would be great. Because people do document dumps, and you think what you're doing is you're providing this bulletproof evidence that I can't ignore. And what you're doing is you're providing me with so much evidence, there's no way I'm going to go through it, so I won't know what to look for. Look, you can always give me more, but to start, if you have something that can summarize it quickly enough, I know that sounds hard, but believe me, it's not as hard as you think it is. And we can go from there. And look, all of these are tricky. So if I'm saying no, it's not because I want to say no, and it doesn't mean I'm going to say no in the future. So that's another thing. People, they try to sell me, and it's fine. But if there's a reason why I'm saying no, it's not. If you just tell me this really bad thing in your story, you're going to change my mind. That's probably not what's going to do it. But I know it, and I'm always looking for ways to present these. So that's another thing. Just bear with me. As I said, people get sued. They take a long time. They're not easy to do. That may just be the reason why right now I can't do it.
Yep. And it just goes to show there's not enough of you if you're getting overwhelmed by all requests.
Right. No, there's definitely. It would be easier if a lot of the people who are coming to me could just go to their local press and get it done there. That would be the way it would spread quickly. But, I'm working with a baseball player right now, and he's having trouble, and he's a former, and he's like famous enough that you would think just from the fame, but it's basically the same problems. It's a custody case. You don't want to get involved. 2 sides to the story, so much hard work, this, that, and the other. And he has, like, in his story, the elements you usually would like in a story, celebrity, other things. And it's hard. They're hard. So yeah, look, if you contact me and I can't do it, it's not, I'm interested in all of them. I'd love to do them all at some time, but just give me a chance and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And if you are a whistleblower, You could come on and honestly change your voice, whatever you want to do. I'd like to have you. Contact Michael, but also contact me. We'll put you on. I've had 2 so far. We're going to have a lot more as we go along here. And we'll even do a video like we're going to do with one of the gentlemen that we had on here just previously. So with that, I do want to thank you for being on the show and want to schedule again, maybe in 3 months as this case in St. Louis develops. I'm thinking they're going to try and whitewash it somehow, but if the press can cover it, it should be okay. They can't. I mean,
well, they have cards to play, but it's too late. This thing has momentum that you can't stop. They will hold on to their power with every fiber of their being because their power is their entire lives, but. It's too late. This thing has gone and the horse is out of the stable, if you will. And whatever they try to do, they can't. There's too much momentum. It won't stop.
I agree. And it's that's just happening in St. Louis. It's happening in a lot of different places. So again, if you have seen this outside of St. Louis, or if you've seen it inside St. Louis, let somebody know anonymously. You can let me know, let Michael know, let Megan know. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, great having you on the show. And I'm going to schedule you for 3 months from now, if you don't mind.
Anytime. Have me back on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for tuning in. A reminder that we are not attorneys and this is not legal advice. We advise you to do the research yourself or to contact an attorney you trust. There are very few of them. This was Divorce Matters Podcast.